For more than 3,000 cycles, the Zelzer Galactic Empire had not been lightly challenged. With their tremendous military might, they ruthlessly dominated the stars, destroying civilizations one after another. Their most recent target was a backwater planet that seemed inconsequential, Earth. The Supreme Chancellor made the choice to include humanity in their empire. Compliance was expected, no, required. But Earth was erratic, not at war, and worst of all, it refused to acknowledge the Almighty Empire's authority. That was unacceptable. In the clean, brightly lit United Nations Galactic Affairs Chamber, a holographic transmission flared to life. The towering, armor-clad figure of Supreme Chancellor Raphael appeared in the Geneva Diplomatic Chamber, where Earth's representatives dealt with extraterrestrial matters. He loomed over the assembly, a perfect balance of bureaucratic authority and imperial menace. His voice boomed with reverberation, and his yellowed eyes blazed beneath a furrowed brow heavy with exhaustion. "This is the final warning the Zelzer Empire will give you," he said slowly, each word calculated to intimidate. "We have ignored your violations long enough. Your species continues to defy the intergalactic order. You've rejected every diplomatic effort. Your primitive world has been deemed a threat. Submit now or be obliterated." Human diplomats responded with a half-hearted murmur and suppressed yawns. One man in the back was still scrolling his phone. The ultimatum landed with the same urgency as a memo about a minor policy update, slightly annoying, mildly interesting, but ultimately something to ignore, at least until it became a real problem. Veronica Ronnie Rutherford, Earth's most amenable diplomat, didn't even look up, still browsing an internet debate about whether Die Hard counted as a Christmas movie. She casually poked her microphone and said, "Yeah, we hear you, buddy." Behind Chancellor Raphael, the warlords of the Empire gasped. "Do you recognize how serious this is?" one hissed. Ronnie, adjusting her bathrobe, barely blinked. "What exactly do you want us to do about it?" "Give up your independence. Accept the Empire's rule." She tilted her head, pretending to think for 2 seconds, then returned to her tablet. I'll pass. But thanks for checking in. We'll get back to you when we're not busy." Gasps rippled through the War Council. One general, a four-eyed reptilian with a flair for drama, snarled, "They're playing psychological warfare." Ronnie sipped her coffee, glanced at the wall clock, and replied, "Might be, but honestly, you just called at a bad time. My lunch is getting cold." The Chancellor's fists clenched. "You'll regret this insolence." "Okay, I'm putting you on hold," Ronnie said, waving at the screen. The transmission cut out. The Galactic War Room went silent. The Supreme Chancellor, destroyer of countless civilizations, just sat there, stunned. "Did she just put us on hold?" asked a warlord, struggling to process the moment. "It's been confirmed," replied the communications officer. Back on Earth, Ronnie stretched, leaned back, and grinned. The diplomatic officer next to her, a tired man who'd long since stopped pretending to care, raised an eyebrow. "You just hung up on the Galactic Empire." "I sure did," she said, grabbing a slice of cold pizza. "The Empire could invade at any time." "But would they?" Ronnie took another bite. "They're an empire, of course they'll try. But honestly, we just treated them like a spam call. That's got to sting." And it did. For the next 3 days, silence. No attacks, no invasions, no fleets blocking out the sun. Meanwhile, in the Zelzer High Command's war room, chaos reigned. Every holographic projection, every strategy document, every military plan was being reviewed, re-reviewed, and overanalyzed. "They're hiding something," muttered one strategist. Maybe they're waiting for us to strike first, said another. Whispers filled the room. Earth had to have a hidden plan. They decided to test Earth's defenses, not to destroy it, but to show force. A fleet would be sent, a display of overwhelming power. Back on Earth, Ronnie received a status update on the fleet. She read the report while making fresh coffee, deleted it, then deleted it again. Moments later, an intern knocked on her door. "Madam, the Galactic Empire is." "They'll be here in a moment," she interrupted, stirring her creamer. Less than 24 hours later, the fleet arrived in Earth's orbit. Ronnie, feet on her desk, sipped her drink. Outside, the Empire's massive ships formed an intimidating blockade. Imperial doctrine said fear came first, then surrender, then conquest. But there were no missile launches, no evacuations, no panic. Only a massive neon sign on the International Space Station, "Office closed. Please try again Monday." Commander Kaisak, a hardened war veteran, watched in disbelief. "There's nothing. No response, no defense, no fear." He connected to the Supreme Chancellor. "They don't seem concerned." Raphael's voice shook. "Begin the attack." The Empire's flagship weapon, capable of turning mountains to rubble, fired. The result, the beam harmlessly reflected off a mirrored skyscraper. Another blast hit an abandoned parking lot. One leveled a condemned warehouse. The final beam accidentally triggered a local festival's fireworks. From orbit, the commanders watched Earth cities cheer, thinking it was part of the show. One officer whispered, "This planet is cursed." Phase 2 began, a ground invasion. Elite shock troops deployed into what they believed was the perfect landing zone, a warm, marshy, low-population area. They knew nothing about Florida. Pods opened. Troops stepped into swamps and were immediately under attack. "Commander, we've lost men," a scout screamed over the comms. "Some kind of local life form. Massive jaws, incredible speed." The comms cut out. Other troops encountered humans, but not just any humans. A sunburned man, shirtless, wielding a folding chair, single-handedly took out a squad. Elsewhere, a gang of senior citizens on motorized scooters outmaneuvered another unit. Some were riding motorcycles with purses full of coins wielded like deadly projectiles. One wounded trooper sent a final plea requesting immediate extraction, "Avoid standard warfare tactics. They are not normal." Chris Tack, the invasion commander, watched it all unfold in horror. He whispered to himself, "This is not war. This is madness." The Supreme Chancellor of the Zelzer Empire had not recognized humanity as the most terrifying race in the galaxy. Raphael sat motionless in the Imperial War Room, yet to experience true shame. His strategists and warlords avoided making eye contact, their customary haughty assurance gone. The invasion had been a disaster. The fleet had fled in disgrace, their names shattered like brittle glass. For days earlier, Earth had already become a silent warning to lesser empires. They had looked for a response, there had to be a reason why. It couldn't be. Why Earth hadn't retaliated. But despite fielding the most sophisticated army in the known universe, the Zelzer military's sheer ineptitude meant one thing: they were not superior. Earth had barely lifted a finger to defend itself, and yet something had stopped the assault. Not power, not weapons. Something else. Something ethereal. Something terrifying. Finally, one of Raphael's advisors spoke, his voice tinged with ambiguity. "The laws of war do not apply here." Raphael exhaled softly, steepling his fingers. "They fight like no other species. They are not afraid like other animals are." He leaned forward, face unreadable, and sent a polite request. The word diplomacy had never before been used in the same sentence as humanity. The room erupted in gasps. Diplomacy was a concept for societies that recognized order, not for animals that howled across a battlefield. A junior officer hesitated. "We do not bargain with primitives, Supreme Chancellor." Then Ronnie Rutherford sent the transmission. The war room went silent. She received the diplomatic request while waiting in line at a coffee shop, barely looking up from her phone. The message arrived just as the barista topped her triple macchiato with extra froth. Formal, slightly patronizing, and clearly an effort to avoid sounding desperate. Call a conference to review the state of interspecies relations, a polite way to say, "We don't want to admit we lost, but please don't make us deal with your insane planet again." She took a sip, steam curling against the autumn air, and smiled. A diplomatic encounter could be fascinating, or at the very least, funny. Her reply was short and direct: "Make sure to pack snacks." When the Supreme Chancellor received the response he'd waited for, his eye twitched. It wasn't a demand. It wasn't a threat. It was a casual affirmation. The warlords had already started asking about snack options. Disturbed by their previous encounter with humanity, they interpreted it as something far more sinister, psychological warfare, a level of strategic manipulation so advanced it transcended battlefields and moved into the absurd. A space station orbiting halfway between Earth and Zelzer was chosen as neutral ground. The human delegation was meticulously selected, trained in negotiation, deception, and subtle coercion, the best Earth had to offer. The Zelzer Empire handpicked its most manipulative minds, and they all waited. Ronnie Rutherford arrived 20 minutes late. No formal attire, no diplomatic greeting. Sunglasses indoors, a drink with far too much whipped cream. She apologized, stopped talking, and sat down. The Supreme Chancellor stared at her across the polished table, a man who had won countless wars, now trying to solve a puzzle that refused to follow logic. Empires had knelt at his command, and yet here sat this human, completely unfazed by his presence, casually sipping her elaborate beverage as if this were nothing more than another mundane Tuesday afternoon.